So I welcome everyone for reading Prabhupada LILAMRITA. We are in chapter 18, breaking ground. Do you all remember, we are still in the situation in the Bowery, and Prabhupada is intensely preaching, but still it's how interesting situation that he worked so hard somehow or other to get that place. Now he's letting everybody sleep there also in the night, whether they give money or not. And getting money is becoming also very, very difficult. It's here. Money was scarce. From this evening, meetings would be usually collect about $5 to $6 in change and bills. That's what he used to get. And however, at least something he has now, and it's moving. But he's totally depending on the Lord Krishna. He is living by example. So mostly so here we see Raphael and Don, they went to get, trying to get some money and some apples, some fruits or something, right? Yeah. Mostly he kept his room working. As he had said during a lecture when living on the Bowery, I'm here always working at something, reading or writing something, reading or writing 24 hours. His mission of translating Srimad Bhagavatam, of presenting the complete work in 60 volumes of 400 pages each, could only occupy all his days and nights. He worked at it whenever possible, sitting at his portable typewriter or translating the Sanskrit into English. He especially worked in the very early hours of the morning when he would not be interrupted. He would come through the Sanskrit and Bengali commentaries of the great acharyas, following their explanations, selecting passages from them, adding his own knowledge and realization, and then laboriously weaving it all together and typing out his Bhaktivedanta purports. He had no means or immediate plans for financing the publishing of further volumes. So again, he had no means or immediate plans for financing the publishing of the further volumes, but he continued in the faith that somehow they would be published. He had broad mission, broader even than translating Srimad Bhagavatam. And so he gave much of his time and energy to meeting visitors. Had his only aim been to write, then there would have been no need to have taken the risk and trouble to coming to America. Now, many people were coming, and an important part of his mission was to talk to them and convince them of Krishna consciousness. His visitors were usually young men who had recently come to live on the Lower East Side. He had no secretary to screen his visitors, nor did he have scheduled visiting hours. Whenever anyone happened by at any time from early morning to 10 at night, Prabhupada would stop his typing or translating and speak with them. It was an open neighborhood, and many visitors would come by right of the street. Some were serious, but many were not. Some even came intoxicated. Often they came not to inquire submissively, but to challenge. So here is the situation: is that one man, no money, and all he has is this, a piece, but sometimes it's better to have something than nothing. And no money, but he has, we saw he's translated the first volume, first canto in India, 3 volume sets, but he was still working on it. No funding at this time. Who will fund? But I had a faith that something will come up, somehow will come up. Apart from that, he is he's thinking broader way. His plan is, if translation is the only goal, he would have done it in India itself. So here's other purpose. He's spending time with anyone who comes. His open door policy looks like whole day and evening, morning, evening. Even though he was busy translating, from different purports of different acharyas. But still he would time, and people can interrupt him, he would give time and explain them and preach them. Many of them, some few would take seriously, many different kind of audience would come. That's an interesting thing. Yeah, AJ, please read.
Starting with, okay. Once a young hippie on an LSD trip found his way upstairs and sat opposite the Swami. Right now, I am higher than you are, he announced. I am God. Prabhupada bowed his head slightly, his palms folded. Please accept my obeisances. He said. Then he asked God to please leave. Others admitted frankly that they were crazy or haunted by ghosts and sought relief from their mental suffering. Juan Solomon said, I was looking for spiritual centers, places where one can go, not like stores where they ask you to leave, but where you can actually talk to people and try to understand the ultimate truth. I would come to Swami's knowing it was definitely a spiritual center. There was definitely something there. I was on drugs and disturbed with the notion that I must be God, or some very important personality way out of proportion to my actual situation. I was actually in trouble, mentally deranged because of so much suffering, and I would kind of blow in to see him whenever I felt the whim to do so. I didn't make a point of going to his meetings, but a lot of times I would just come. One time I came and spent the night there. I was always welcome at any time to sleep in the storefront. I wanted to show the Swami what a sad case I was, so he should definitely do something for me. He told me to join him and he could solve my problems, but I wasn't ready. I was really into sex, and I wanted to know what he meant by illicit sex. What was his definition? He said to me, this means sex outside of marriage. But I wasn't satisfied with the answer, and I asked him for more details. He told me to first consider the answer he had given me and then come back the next day and he would tell me more. Then I showed up with a girl. The Swami came to the door and said, I am very busy. I have my work. I have my translating. I cannot talk with you now. Well, that was the only time he didn't offer me full hospitality and full attention and talk with me as many questions as I had. So I left immediately with the girl. He was correct in the perception that I was simply going to see him just to try to impress the girl. He saw through it right away, and he rejected that type of association. But every time I came, I was in trouble, and he always helped me. So this is, so this guy, he drug addict, a little Looney Tune there. And, he despite that, Prabhupada would still, let him stay there, or he would still talk to him, or, try to help him or try to impart some knowledge on him. But at the same time it sounds like he would only take this guy seriously if this guy was taking him seriously. So he talks about when he showed up with a girl just to try to impress the girl that he knew, that he knew the Swami or that he had this association. And Prabhupada knew right away what the guy was up to and sent him packing. He was like, I don't have time for this. I got too much work to do to be fooling around with you. And this guy sounded like he partially wanted to learn, but he also, would go in with the attempt to challenge Prabhupada at times. And, and I assume this interview, right, this passage is in hindsight, right? This guy has realized, that he was suffering at that time and that he was in pain and he had all these problems. I guess, Prabhupada was able to help see his way through the issues eventually, it sounds like. So
he used to stay there also.
Yeah, like Prabhupada would let him crash there. Yeah, if he needed to. So
only probably he didn't want to just bother me unnecessarily. Probably bother him unnecessarily. Probably didn't. That's he rejected.
Well, it's like when you think about it, in the earlier chapters they talk about how for at least the homeless population and guys like that had nowhere else to go, they could sleep at the shelters, but they would get kicked out during the day. Plus, typically, if you hear about homeless shelters, they're not a great place to be in terms of sleeping there. You have to worry about your stuff getting stolen or, fights breaking out, things like that. So, Prabhupada's offering these guys a place to stay that's relatively safe for them. So it's no surprise that he was getting some colorful characters coming through, that may have been abusing his hospitality a little bit, but at the same time still gaining some benefit, it seems, from his teachings.
Yeah, I think because it's a cold country, you need a shelter. In India, if somebody is beggar, homeless, but they're not thieves actually. Even the beggars, they're not thieves in India. Most, majority of them. I don't know. But we haven't had that kind of experience.
Yeah.
So because India weather allows to lie them anywhere they can lie actually. Maybe here you need always something indoor, closed. That's why we have shelters here. Okay, thank you, Sai Kung Fu.
Sometimes young men would come with scholarly pretensions to test the Swami's knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. You have read the Gita, Prabhupada would say, so what is your conclusion? If you claim to know the Gita, then you should know the conclusion that Krishna is presenting. But most people didn't think that there was supposed to be a definite conclusion to the Gita. And even if there was such a conclusion, that didn't mean they were supposed to arrange their life around it. The Gita was a spiritual book, and you didn't have to follow it. One young man approached the Swami asking, "What book will you lecture from next week? Will you be teaching the Tibetan Book of the Dead?" As if Prabhupada would teach spirituality like a college survey course in world religions. Everything is there in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada replied. We could study one verse for 3 months. And there were other questions. What about Camus? What is his philosophy? Prabhupada would ask. He says everything is absurd and the only philosophical question is whether to commit suicide. That means everything is absurd for him. The material world is absurd, but there is spiritual world behind this one. That means he does not know the soul. The soul cannot be killed. Ardents of various thinkers approached him. What about Nietzsche, Kafka, Timothy Leary, Bob Dylan? Prabhupada would ask what the philosophy was, and the particular follower would have to explain and defend his favorite intellectual hero. So here, Prabhupada basically, if somebody comes, a young person comes to the lectures and says that they know about Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada would ask them what do they know about Bhagavad Gita and what is their conclusion, and are they following it and who is presenting it. So if anybody says they know the Bhagavad Gita, they should know that Krishna is the one who is presenting it. And one young man, when he approached Prabhupada and asked, what are you going to focus on from next week? Will you be teaching from a different book? Prabhupada said, everything is in the Bhagavad Gita and we don't need any other books, and we could study one verse for 3 months. And people would ask about other philosophical books and authors, about like Nietzsche, Kafka, Timothy Leary, Bob Dylan. Prabhupada would ask what the philosophy was, and they would have to explain and defend about the philosophy. And basically, he would say that they were all mental speculators.
That's the better way, rather than they will come millions of books. They will come and read. Okay, you tell what they are saying. Yeah. If you say you don't know, then what is the point of discussion? Okay, if you know this is, but then Prabhupada would give counter. So that way, Bhagavad Gita really can answer every philosophy. We can see with our personal experience. Yes,
Josna is not here today.
She's not there. Okay. Today is holiday, break day. Yeah. Pranath Prabhu, you can read.
Hare Krishna. They are all mental speculators, Prabhupada would say. Here in this material world, we are all conditioned souls. Your knowledge is imperfect. Your senses are blunt. What good is your opinion? We have to hear from the perfect authority, Krishna. Do you mean to say that none of the great thinkers are God conscious? A boy asked. Their sincerity is their God consciousness. But if we want perfect knowledge of God, then we have to consult Shastra. Often there were challenges, but under the Swami's stare and hard logic, the challenger would usually trail off into thoughtful silence. Is the spiritual knowledge of China advanced? Prabhupada would sometimes answer simply by making a sour face. Well, I'm a follower of Vedanta myself. Do you know what Vedanta means? What is the first aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra? Do you know? No, I. Then how can you speak of Vedanta? Vedescha sarver ahameva vedya. Krishna says is the goal of Vedanta. So if you are a Vedantist, then you must become Krishna conscious. What about the Buddha? Do you follow him? No. No, you just talk. Why don't you follow? Follow Krishna, follow Christ, follow Buddha, but don't just talk. This sounds the same as Christianity. How is it any different? It is the same love of God, but who is a Christian? Who follows? The Bible teaches thou shalt not kill, but all over the world Christians are expert in killing. Do you know that? I believe the Christians say that Jesus Christ died for our sins. So why are you still sinning? Interesting. So I don't think we went there, bro. Did we? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So this is a boy is asking all questions and Prabhupada is answering. And you know how we can have perfect knowledge about God, and Prabhupada would often answer as always, and stare and hard logic that keeps the the person asking questions, make them quiet, and it's a series of conversations, question and answers, and how Prabhupada is answering about Vedanta and Vedanta Sutra, and why somebody should become Krishna conscious, or for that matter, even just God conscious, whether one is a Christian or a Buddhist, to be to understand what that means. Can you scroll down, Prabhu?
Yeah.
So, and then Prabhupada explains about Vedanta and about following. This is funny the way he answered about Buddha. You just talk. Why don't you follow? And yeah, that even about Christianity, how the 10 commandments, right? One of them says thou shalt not kill, but Prabhupada is explaining why, even though we claim as Christians that we are not following the basic tenet of Christianity.
Yeah, same thing is prevalent until now. People
Mhm.
want to argue and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk only, but hardly anyone follows.
But Prabhu, there is some other version that I have. When I had a conversation, somebody was saying it's in there's a King James version, and the other one I'm told they've changed in one of them to "Thou shalt not murder."
Yeah.
Is that right, AJ? Maybe you can help.
I haven't read either.
So
I haven't heard that there. No, it's been a while since I've seen a Bible, but yeah, I don't know that.
okay. just this is one thing that they have honestly not been able to answer, yes, even till date. Although they said even Jesus, killed fish, and it's allowed in the Bible, and these explanations I've heard when we
Okay,
go out
yeah.
for book distribution.
Okay, that's fish is allowed. Then why you kill everybody? In China, they are showing now. I don't know how much true. Is 100 varieties or 200 varieties animal? They're showing all these videos. Feels so bad. Yeah. So it feels so bad. How can we eat this thing? But well, that's the variety of in this material world. People have different consciousness.
Yeah, even in India, as you know, a lot of people eat. It's not just yeah.
Right. So these people are there all over,
Yeah.
like this.
In all faiths, actually.
Actually, it is not. It is really not to faith. Even Hindus also don't do it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just because he's here. They are bringing this.
Yeah. No, I'm generally saying, Prabhu, that
The audience is here now.
Yeah.
Mata is there.
No, Prabhu. She's attending the kids side.
Yeah. Prasanthi?
Real quick, I was gonna say I did look it up. So I guess if the original Hebrew does translate to "Thou shalt not murder," but the King James version listed as "Thou shalt not kill."
Yeah, so that's what I heard. I heard this logic and argument on the street.
Thou shalt not kill is the original one, right? Yeah.
The other way around, actually. Yeah.
Murder. Thou shalt not murder is the original one.
No,
Yes.
Prabhu, it's not original. I see. This is again. There are different within Christianity. Also, there are so many different groups that right. The King James version says, "Thou shalt not kill." Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Nice. Prasanthi?
Although Prabhupada was a stranger to America, they were there were strangers to absolute knowledge. Whenever anyone would come to see him, he wouldn't waste time. He talked philosophy, reason, argument. He constantly argued against atheism and impersonalism. He spoke strongly to, to prove the existence of God and the universality of Krishna consciousness. He talked often and vigorously day and night, meeting all kinds of questions and philosophies. He would listen also, and he heard a wide range of local testimonies. He heard the dissatisfaction of young Americans with the war and with American society. One boy told him he didn't want to get married because he couldn't find a chaste girl. It was better to go with prostitutes. Another confided that his mother had planned to abort him, but at the last moment his grandmother had convinced her not to. He heard from homosexuals. Someone told him that a set of New Yorkers it chic to, considered it chic to eat the flesh of aborted babies. And in every case, he told them the truth. He talked with Marcus and explained that although Marx says that everything is the property of the state, the fact is that everything is the property of God. Only spiritual communism, which puts God in the center, can actually be successful. He discounted LSD visions as hallucinations and explained how God can be seen factually and what God looks like. Although these one-time visitors came and went by, a few new friends began to stay on. Watching the Swami deal with different guests, they began to appreciate the Swami's arguments, his concern for people, his devotion to Krishna. He seemed actually to know how to help people, and he invariably offered them Krishna consciousness as much as they could take as a solution to their problems. A few began to take the Swami's message to heart. So he spoke with many people. Some people confided why they are doing and what they want. So some boy says he doesn't want to get married. It's better to be with prostitutes. He heard from homosexuals, and one guy was talking about eating the flesh of aborted babies. And there are several kinds of people who came to him and talked to him. And every time he told them the truth, what is right and what is wrong. And he explained them that they should put God in the center, and and then all their problems would be solved. And he also explained that LSD visions are hallucinations and not that they are experiencing anything related to spiritual or godly behavior. Um, and he also he mostly talked to them and also heard their arguments and their concerns and offered them Krishna consciousness. And even though most of them come and go, few of them actually took the message to heart and stayed with him. That's all, Prabhu. You are on mute.
Oh, I'm muted. Satyamataji, please.
We shall call our society ISKCON. Prabhupada had laughed playfully when he first coined the acronym. He had initiated the legal work of incorporation that spring, while still living on the brewery. But even before its legal beginning, he had been talked about his International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And so it had appeared in the letter to India and in the village voice. A friend has suggested a title that would sound more familiar to Westerners: International Society for God Consciousness. But Prabhupada had insisted Krishna consciousness. God was a vague term, whereas Krishna was exactly and scientific. God consciousness was spiritually weaker, less personal. And if Westerners didn't know the Krishna was God, then International Society for Krishna Consciousness would tell them by speaking his glories in every town and village. Krishna consciousness was Prabhupada's own rendering of phrase from Srila Rupa Goswami Padyavali, written in the 16th century, Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita, to be absorbed in the mellow taste of executing the devotional service to Krishna. But to register the ISKCON legally as a non-profit, tax-exempt religious required money and a lawyer. Religion required money and lawyer. Karl, Karl Ergens had already gained some experience in forming the religious, political, and social welfare groups. And when he had met Prabhupada on the brewery, he had agreed to him. He had contacted his lawyer, Stephen Goldsmith.
Finish this.
Okay. Stephen Goldsmith, a young Jewish lawyer with a wife and two children and an office on Park Avenue, was interested in spiritual movement. When Clark told him about Prabhupada's plan, he was immediately fascinated by the idea of setting up a religious corporation for an Indian Swami. He visited Prabhupada at 22nd Avenue and they discussed incorporations, tax exemptions, Prabhupada immigration status, and Krishna consciousness. Mr. Goldsmith visited Prabhupada several times. Once he brought his children, who liked the soup the Swami cooked. He began attending the evening lectures, where he was often only non-hippie member of a congregation. One evening, having completed all the legal groundwork and began ready to complete the procedure for incorporation, Mr. Goldsmith came to Prabhupada lecture and Kirtan to get the signature from the trustees for the new society.
Wow. So I'm happy to hear. Only, at least finally, he got one a non-hippie member of the congregation. That's a big thing. At least you can, mental state will be stable and to talk. Prabhupada has been dealing with all this time with, and even in regards to ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Prabhupada's thought and decision is already clear. You know, people have thousands of opinions. In hippies, they don't have their own senses. Still, they have their own opinions. And how Prabhupada really tolerated. He knew that by putting Krishna consciousness, it makes exact meaning and it will spread. You know, Krishna's name will be spread by the name of organization itself. So that is, now you know, to register, he needs the money. Carl, you know, who has been always favorable, he knows he gets the lawyer, Stephen Goldsmith. Seems like he's very nice, well-balanced man. So he was coming and trying to help in setting up the ISKCON society. Prabhupada visa status and everything looks like he was working on that. Okay, Vijayanand Prabhu.
July 11. Prabhupada is lecturing. Mr. Goldsmith, wearing slacks and a shirt and a tie, sits on the floor near the door, listening earnestly to the lecture. Despite the distracting noises from the neighborhood, Prabhupada has been explaining how scholars mislead innocent people with non-devotional interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, and now, in recognition of the attorney's respectable presence, and as if to catch Mr. Goldsmith's attention better, introduces him into the subject of the talk. I will give you a practical example of how things are misinterpreted. Just like our president, Mr. Goldsmith, he knows that expert lawyers, by interpretation, can do so many things. When I was in Calcutta, there was a rent tax passed by the government, and some expert lawyer changed the whole thing by his interpretation. The government had to reenact a whole law because their purpose was foiled by the interpretation of this lawyer. So we are not out for foiling the purpose of Krishna, for which the Bhagavad Gita was spoken. But unauthorized persons are trying to foil the purpose of Krishna. Therefore, that is unauthorized. All right, Mr. Goldsmith, you can ask anything. Mr. Goldsmith stands, and to the surprise of the people gathered, he makes a short announcement asking for signers on an incorporation document for the Swami's new religious movement. Prabhupada, they are present here. You can take the address. You can take the addresses now. Mr. Goldsmith, I can take them now. Yes. Prabhupada, yes, you can. Bill, you can give your address, and Raphael, you can give yours, and Don, Roy, Mr. Green. As the meeting breaks up, those called on.
You want to read more? You can read more.
Yeah, Prabhu, I can read.
Okay.
As the meeting breaks up, those called on to sign as trustees come forward, standing around in the little storefront, waiting to leaf curiously, cursorily, through the pages the lawyer had produced from his thin attach, and to sign as he directs. Yet not a soul among them is committed to Krishna consciousness. So these passages start with Mr. Goldsmith, who was basically an attorney and who was helping to register the society, the ISKCON, and in one such preaching session, lecturing session, Mr. Goldsmith also participated, and Prabhupada was explaining how the scholarly people misled the innocent people with the non-devotional interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. So since Mr. Goldsmith was present here and who was also an attorney, so he wanted to catch his attention. So he gave an example to explain his thoughts in a same like line of thought actually. So some same line of example basically. So he was saying like how the misinterpretation can make people to create confusion. So he was saying like in Calcutta there was one rent tax passed by the government, and some of the lawyers misinterpreted the law, and because of that the whole law needs to be changed, and the government has to make a lot of changes because it was misunderstood by the some of the lawyers. So similarly, Prabhupada was comparing this lawyer example with the people who are giving commentary for Bhagavad Gita, by spoiling the actual purpose and the meaning behind it. So he was saying those people who are giving who are trying to foil the actual essence of Gita, basically they are unauthorized, and he was telling them that we should not listen to them and follow them. After this preaching is done, basically he's asking Goldsmith he can go ahead and do what he can speak. And at that time Mr. Goldsmith stands, and he was having an incorporation document for the new religious movement. So he asked everyone to sign on them, and Prabhupada was also insisting Bill, Raphael, and Don, Roy, and Green, everyone to sign on those incorporation document, and by giving their address and all. So all these people came and sign into those incorporation document as a trustee. But the important thing to be noted is none of them were committed to Krishna consciousness, but still they signed as a trustee for the movement to be incorporated as the ISKCON actually.
Very nice. Rajeshwar, please read.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Read. You read.
Mr. Goldsmith meets his quota of singers, a handful of sympathizers with enough reverence toward the Swami to want to help him. The first trustees, who will hold office for a year until the first annual meeting of the corporation, are Michael Grant, who puts down his name and addresses without ever reading the document, Mike's girlfriend Jan, and James Greeny. No one seriously intends to undertake any formal duties as trustee of the religious society, but they are happy to help the Swami by signing his fledgling society into legal existence. According to law, a second group of trustees will assume office for the second year. They are Paul Gardiner, Roy, and Don. The trustees for the third year are Carl Jorgnes, Bill Epstein, and Raphael. None of them know exactly what the half of a dozen legal-sized type pages mean, except that Swamiji is forming a society. Why? For tax exemption, in case someone gives a big donation, and for other benefits an official religious society might receive. But these purposes hardly seem urgent or even relevant to the present situation. Who's going to make donations, except maybe for Mr. Goldsmith, who has any money? But Prabhupada is planning for the future, and he's planning for much more than just tax exemptions. He's trying to serve his spiritual predecessors and fulfill the spiritual prediction of a spiritual movement that is to flourish for 10,000 years in the midst of the age of Kali. Within the vast Kali age, a period which is to last 432,000 years, the 1960s are but an insignificant movement. So here Prabhupada is, the point emphasized is why Prabhupada is trying to, first the names are given, those who are helping Prabhupada to sign the, start the organization, signing. So they are not very much into it, but they want to help Prabhupada. And the reason, what is the reason is emphasized that, is this making a non-profit organization or something? And then Prabhupada, there's no one interested who is ready to give, because who is going to give them, Prabhupada, that much of donation? So the whole idea is to basically, spread the message of Krishna consciousness as mentioned by the acharyas. And that's where Prabhupada is having complete faith. And we see the determination of Prabhupada, the faith of Prabhupada, which he has in the acharyas.
Thank you so much.
But Prabhupada is planning. The Vedas describe that the time of the universe revolves through a cycle of 4 seasons, or yugas, and Kali Yuga is the worst of times, in which all spiritual qualities of men diminish until humanity is finally reduced to a bestial civilization devoid of human decency. However, the Vedic literature foretells a golden age of spiritual life, beginning after the advent of Lord Chaitanya and lasting for 10,000 years, an eddy that runs against the current of Kali Yuga. With the vision that soars off to the end of the millennium and beyond, yet with these 2 feet solidly on the ground of 2nd Avenue, Prabhupada has begun an international society for Krishna consciousness. He has many practical responsibilities, paying the rent, incorporating his society, paving the way for a thriving worldwide congregation of devotees. Yet he doesn't see his humble beginning as limiting the greater scope of his divine mission. He knows that everything depends on Krishna. So whether he succeeds or fails is up to the Supreme. He has only to try. The purpose is stated within ISKCON's articles of incorporation reveal Prabhupada's thinking. There were 7 points similar to those in the prospectus for the League of Devotees. He formed in Jhansi, India in 1953. That attempt had been unsuccessful, yet his purpose remained unchanged.
So this is the time duration is given about the cycle of 4 seasons, or yugas actually. The Kali Yuga is the worst of the time where people have no intelligence. And it's a very, very challenging task is being taken actually at this time. And here he's registering his organization to save the mankind. With so many responsibilities he has. But the 10,000 years which is mentioned here, even though in this age of Kali, so many, but the 10,000 years is going to flourish this Krishna conscious movement, and this registration of the organization is like seeding, planting the seed to it. So he has, interestingly, he has many practical response: paying the rent, incorporation, paving the path, how to drive the worldwide congregation and everything. So the purpose is stated within that ISKCON articles of incorporation reveals Prabhupada's thinking. There were 7 points similar to those given in the League of Devotees in Jhansi in 1953. That attempt didn't go; it was not successful. Now, I would say, even if you're mute, it's okay. But this 7 purposes we all read together. Okay. If you want to mute, you can unmute. Doesn't matter. But please read. We'll start. 7 purposes of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness: to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge, society at large, and to educate
all peoples in the techniques of spiritual life, in order to check the imbalance of values and achieve peace.
And peace in the world.
to propagate a consciousness of
Krishna as it is revealed in the
Gita and Bhagavatam,
Srimad,
to bring the members of the society together with each other
and nearer to Krishna,
thus
the prime city, thus to develop the idea within the members and humanity at large. Each soul is part and parcel of the parts of the body of God, Krishna.
and encourage the
The Sankirtan movement, congregational chanting the holy name of God as revealed in the teachings of Lord Ch.18 Mahaprabhu.
for the members and for the society at large,
a holy place of transcendental pastimes,
pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna.
To bring
the
The
members
members
together
closer
purpose
together for the purpose of taking
more natural way
a more natural way of life,
with a
with
view
a
towards
view
achieving
towards achieving the aforementioned purposes to publish and distribute periodicals, magazines, books, and other writings.
Five word. Nice. So hope everybody had a little glance. At least we know what is our purpose. It's not none other than about these purposes. Those who don't, how many of you first time reading this? The purposes, 7 purposes.
Yeah, I'm ready for the first time. Prabhu.
First time. Yeah. You want should I text all of send all of you? I'll put a copy in our LILAMRITA group. Okay. So you all can spend some time and contemplate on this. Okay, so let me move. Regardless of what ISKCON charter members thought of the society's purposes, Prabhupada saw them as imminent realities. As Mr. Rubin, the subway conductor, who had met Prabhupada on a Manhattan Park bench in 1965, had noted, he seemed to know that he would have temples filled up with devotees. The temples and books, he said, they are existing, they are there, but the time is separating us from them. The first purpose mentioned in the charter was propagation, preaching, was the word Prabhupada most often used. For him, preaching had a much broader significance than mere sermonizing. Preaching meant glorious, selfless adventures on behalf of the Supreme Lord. Lord Chaitanya had preached by walking all over southern India and causing thousands of people to chant and dance with him in ecstasy. Lord Krishna had preached the Bhagavad Gita while standing with Arjuna in his chariot on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Lord Buddha had preached, Lord Jesus had preached, and all pure devotees preached. So here about the missions, people they may not be very clear what is happening, but Prabhupada is very clear. He's reflecting in 1965 when the park with Mr. Rubin. He said everything is already there. It's just time is separating from these manifestations. And among that, this purpose, the first is the preaching, mission of preaching, the foremost activity, function, because everybody preached. So we also, the society also, the primary service is to preach the Lord Chaitanya's mission. So we will, looks like all this one by one, we'll be going through the 7 okay, I'll finish a couple of more. ISKCON's preaching would achieve what the League of Nations and the United Nations had failed to achieve. Real unity and peace in the world. ISKCON workers would bring peace to a world deeply afflicted by materialism and strife. They would systematically propagate spiritual knowledge, knowledge of the non-sectarian science of God. It was not that a new religion was being born in July 1966. Rather, the eternal preaching of Godhead, known as Sankirtan, was being transplanted from east to west. So the second mission is to bring the members together, right? So United Nations has been trying to bring the members together, but they could not. They're failing. They're afflicted by the materialism strife. They are failing. So keeping Krishna, systematically propagate spiritual knowledge and keeping keep Krishna in the center, it could be done. That's one of the mission of this society, to bring the members of the society together. Am I right? Let me see, what is the second? Anyone remember what is the second one? To propagate the consciousness of Krishna as it is revealed in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, basically I was mixing up. What the message of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita about the peace. which the United Nations is trying to bring. They have not been, they are unsuccessful to bring peace, and day by day, the number of flags are increasing. So that's one of the mission to propagate the message of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, which can unite the whole world. That's second one. I would say, AJ, you please read the third.
The society's members would join together, and by hearing the teachings of Bhagavad, that one, yeah, the society's members would join together, and by hearing the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, they would come to realize that each was a spirit soul, eternally related to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They would then preach this to the humanity at large, especially through Sankirtan, the chanting of the holy name of God. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. ISKCON would also erect a holy place of transcendental pastimes dedicated to the personality of Krishna. Was this something beyond the storefront? Yes, certainly. He never thought small. He seemed to know that he would have temples filled up with devotees. He wanted ISKCON to demonstrate a simple, more natural way of life. Such a life, Prabhupada thought of the villages of India where people lived just as Krishna had lived, was most conducive to developing Krishna consciousness. And all 6 of these purposes would be achieved by the 7th. ISKCON would publish and distribute literature. This was the special instruction Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had given Srila Prabhupada. He had specifically told him one day in 1932 at Radhakunda in Vrindavan, if you ever get any money, publish books. Certainly none of the signers saw any immediate shape of the Swami to the Swami's dreams. Yet these 7 purposes were not simply theistic rhetoric invented to convince a few New York State government officials. Prabhupada meant to enact every item in the charter.
You can finish this one.
All right. Of course, he was now working in extremely limited circumstances. The principal place of worship, located at 26 2nd Avenue in the city, county, and state of New York, was the sole headquarters for the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. Yet Prabhupada insisted that he was not living at 26 2nd Avenue, New York City. His vision was transcendental. His Guru Maharaj had gone out from the traditional holy places of spiritual meditation to preach in cities like Calcutta, Bombay, and Delhi. And yet Prabhupada would say that his spiritual master had not really been living in any of those cities, but he was always in Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, because of his absorption in devotion and service. So yeah, I mean, it kind of just reiterates the, kind of gives some depth to the 7 steps above, the seven purposes, and just talks about how, especially when you get down towards where your mouse is there, how he wanted to kind of help us learn a simple, more natural way of life, and how Krishna consciousness, or how that was the most conducive way to develop Krishna consciousness in the people. And it also gets into how, all of these things were going to be possible through the distribution and publishing of books. And how that relates back to his original mission when he originally met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in Vrindavan, when I guess at that point when he was almost a kid, right? When he's 30 years prior. So yeah. Yep. I think the line I really liked in this one, if you go down 2 or 3 paragraphs there, is when he's talking about this last paragraph, when he's saying he claims he doesn't live at 26 2nd Avenue, despite him living at 26 2nd Avenue. But his rationale being the same way, he never considered that Bhaktisiddhanta lived in Calcutta or Bombay or Delhi, despite residing there, because he's saying, hey, he was in Vaikuntha, he was in the spiritual world, because he was so devoted to his devotional service and so absorbed in it. So yes, his body may have been in those places, but spiritually he wasn't. And I like that Prabhupada applies the same rationale to his situation of his residence versus where he's truly residing.
That's interesting. The principal place of worship located at 26 Second Avenue in the city, where storefront, which is kind of one room, in the city, county, and state of New York, were the sole headquarters of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And so for us, we can see a small, tiny place, but it's a spiritual significance. Second rule.
Similarly, the place of worship, 26 Second Avenue, was not a New York storefront, a former curiosity shop. The storefront and the apartment had been spiritualized and were now a transcendental haven. Society at large could come here, the whole world could take shelter here, regardless of race or religion. Plain, small, and impoverished as it was, Prabhupada regarded the storefront as a holy place of transcendental pastimes, dedicated to the personality of Krishna. It was the world headquarters, a publishing house, a sacred place of pilgrimage, and a center from which an army of devotees could issue forth and chant the holy names of God in all the streets in the world. The entire universe could receive Krishna consciousness from the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which was beginning here. In Keith, Prabhupada had a serious follower. Within a week of their meeting, Keith had moved out of the Mott Street apartment and was living with Prabhupada. He still dressed in his ragged denim shorts and t-shirt, but he began to do all the Swami's shopping and cooking. While in India, Keith had learned some of the etiquette of reverence toward a holy man and the principles of discipleship. His friends watched him curiously as he dedicated himself to the Swami. Keith, I saw that he was cooking, so I asked him if I could help, and he was very happy at the suggestion. The first couple of times he took me shopping, and after that I mostly did it. He showed me how to make chapatis without a rolling pin by pressing out the dough with your fingers. Every day we would make chapatis, rice, dal, and curries. So Keith became the dependable cook and housekeeper in Prabhupada's apartment. Meanwhile, at the Mott Street apartment, the roommate's favorite topic for discussion was their relationship with the Swami. Everyone thought it was a serious relationship. They knew Swamiji was Guru. And when they heard that he would be giving his daily classes at 6 a.m. up in his apartment, they were eager to attend. So here, basically, it talks about the 22nd Second Avenue, which was not a storefront, but it was like a transcendental place, and it has been spiritualized. Anyone could come there and take shelter and get and learn Krishna consciousness from Prabhupada. And Prabhupada regarded this the storefront as the world headquarters, a publishing house, a sacred place, and where they would discuss all the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna. And from here, they would develop an army of devotees who would spread the chanting of the holy name throughout the world. And in the next few stanzas, it talks about Keith, who was a serious follower. He, along with Howard, they had some previous, they had been to India and they had learned some etiquette of reverence towards Swami. And he asked Prabhupada to see if he can help for cooking, and Prabhupada would actually took him for shopping, and mostly he did the shopping. And he also learned how to make chapatis, and he would help Prabhupada make the prasadam. He was a cook and a housekeeper in Prabhupada's apartment, that he actually moved from the Mott Street apartment and he started staying with Prabhupada. When Prabhupada was going to start the lectures in the morning at 6 a.m., they were all very eager to it.
Okay. Prasanthi?
Keith, I used to walk along the Bowery and look for flowers for him. When there were no flowers, I would take a straw or some grass. I loved going there in the morning. Howard. I would walk very briskly over to Swami's Swamiji's chanting Hare Krishna, feeling better than ever before. Miraculously, the lower east side no longer looked drab. The sidewalks and buildings seemed to sparkle, and in the early morning before the smoke set in, the sky was red and golden. Chuck, I bought a few grapes and came to the door of the Swami. This was all new. Previously, I would always walk toward McDougall's Street, toward Bohemia, aesthetic New York, and now I was walking to the Lower East Side towards the business district, where there were no freaks, artists, or musicians, but simply straight buildings. And somehow, outside the carnival atmosphere, there was a richest attraction for the senses and the heart. Howard, I would sing all the way to the foyer, then ring the buzzer, mark A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and the door would buzz and open. I would walk through the hallway into the small patio and up to his small second floor apartment, tiptoeing quietly so as not to wake up the neighbors. Chuck, I came into the hall of his building and there were many names printed on plaques over the mailboxes. I immediately found the name A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, handwritten on a slip of torn paper, slipped into one of the slots. I rang the buzzer and waited. After a few moments, the door buzzed loudly and I entered through the security lock. I walked through the small garden into the rear building and upstairs. So Prabhupada started conducting the daily classes in the morning at 6 a.m. And many are eagerly waiting to attend his classes. Keith said he used to pick up flowers for him, and he really liked going over there in the morning. And Howard he used to walk very briskly, chanting Hare Krishna, and he felt very happy and looks like he feels like the building seemed to sparkle early in the morning. And Chuck, he got some fruits for Swami, few grapes, and everybody is trying to do some service to the to Swami and show their honor. And they are very eager getting up early in the morning and attending the lecture. And Howard, he's also attending, and Chuck also attend, and they used to come up tiptoe so that they won't wake up the neighbors, and they used to come into his apartment directly.
Well, interesting, isn't it? Who all are they? They are the hippies. The hippies, I don't think they're not very clear about when they sleep, when they wake up. Huh? But what did we hear it? Huh? And when they heard that he would be giving daily classes 6 a.m. up in the apartment, they were eager to attend. And we have to look into our lives. If we start 6 a.m. in the morning, how many of us will be ready to come? Does it make sense? How difficult for us will be to really do this thing. So since Prabhupada knew the secret, only without coming to in the mode of goodness, then we will not grow in spiritual life. That's why he didn't compromise. Many of our ISKCON programs happens at 5 o'clock, but that's not all. That's only to introduce the movement. Then after those who come at 5 p.m. Sunday feast, they should be gradually coming early, working on the morning programs. That's the whole 6 a.m. hippies coming 6 a.m. and they're excited to come. That's a really interesting thing. Okay, maybe one more person can read. Who can read this? Vijayanand Prabhu, you can read.
I came into the hall of his building, and there were many names printed on plaques over the mailboxes. I immediately found the name A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami handwritten on a slip of town paper, slipped into one of the slots. I rang the buzzer and waited. After a few moments, the door buzzed loudly and I entered through the security lock. I walked through the small garden into the rear building and upstairs. Prabhupada held his classes for almost 2 months in the privacy of his room and the same room where he typed and talked to Gus. To Keith, it was not simply a class in philosophy, but a mystical experience of sweetness. Keith, the sound of his voice, the sun coming up, we would chant for a few minutes, softly clapping hands, and Swamiji would speak. The thing that got me most was simply the sound of his voice, especially when he was chanting Sanskrit. It was like music to my ears to hear him speak the raw sound. So as not to disturb the neighbors, Prabhupada would say, chant softly, and he asked the boys to clap softly, so softly that their hands barely touched. Then he would chant the prayers to the spiritual master, Samsara Davanala Lida Loka. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy. Just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it, so the spiritual master extinguishes the blazing fire of material existence. With his eyes closed, he sat singing softly in the dim morning light. The few who attended, Keith, Howard, Chuck, Steve, Valley, sat entranced. Never before had the Swami been so appreciated. So this passages gives the experience of those hippies having the preaching and the program which they are attending in Prabhupada's apartment. So basically, like people, this Keith and other people, like they used to walk into his apartment, rang the bell, and they will go inside. And so since it's an apartment and has a lot of neighboring houses, so Prabhupada requested all of them to chant softly as well as to clap softly, and also with that, their hands were like barely touched. And also he would like chant the prayers to the spiritual master and receiving the benediction from the ocean of mercy, so that it's like they're comparing the mercy of spiritual master with the cloud which pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. So similarly, they were comparing spiritual master with the mercy of spiritual master, they can extinguish the blazing fire of material existence. So this is the experience of them. Like they were not making much noise, but they are enjoying the sessions with Prabhupada in his apartment.
Yeah, I think we can end here. That's very nice. So if you are not doing this, the morning prayer we offer in all our ISKCON temples, including ours, Samsara Davanal, the look of prayers to spiritual master. If you're not doing, you all can start doing. If you need an audio, please let me know what are the things needs to be played in the morning. So it's 8:44. I want to thank you all for joining. I was thinking we'll finish this debate now. We'll finish tomorrow, continue tomorrow on this. Okay. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Prabhupada Lilamrita. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna, I was laughing because I don't remember the name.